An elderly woman sits at her kitchen table, eyes locked on her laptop screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A routine task, a simple login to her bank, has suddenly become impossible. The camera zooms in, bank login errors, failed verification attempts, a vanished Skype icon. This isn't an isolated incident. Across the country, millions of Americans, particularly the elderly, are grappling with similar issues. The digital world they once navigated with ease has become a labyrinth of errors and dead ends. Cut to millions of Americans experiencing the same confusion, frustration, and isolation. A shot of silent streets, discarded devices, Microsoft's towering headquarters in Redmond, Washington, looming over millions of abandoned voices. The promise of technology to simplify and connect has, for many, turned into a source of alienation and despair. Microsoft didn't just retire Skype. They cut off 32 million Americans from their only phone service overnight, Narrator. Many of these users were elderly or living in rural areas where traditional phone services were unreliable or unavailable. Narrator. According to recent statistics, over 60% of these users were over the age of 65, and nearly 40% resided in areas with poor internet infrastructure. Narrator. For many, Skype was a lifeline, connecting them to family, friends, and essential services. Its sudden removal left them isolated and struggling to find alternatives. Margaret Delaney never followed internet news. For 17 years, Skype had been her phone, her voice, her lifeline. She called her doctor, her bank, her family, all through Skype. She never needed a cell phone. Why would she? It had always been enough. Until today. She woke up, brewed her tea, logged into her bank's website, just as she had done hundreds of times before. She entered her credentials, waited for the verification text, expecting it to arrive instantly through Skype. She waited and waited and waited. Nothing came. Her heart tightened. She opened Skype, clicked the icon. Nothing. Skype was gone. No warning, no explanation, just erased. She searched frantically. What happened? Then she saw it, the words that mocked her desperation. Skype has been retired. Teams Free is the replacement. Microsoft had shut down her only connection to the world without telling her. Margaret remembered the first time she used Skype. It was to see her granddaughter's first steps. The joy of seeing her family, even from miles away, was indescribable. She had written letters before, but Skype made everything immediate, personal. Every Sunday, she had a standing call with her sister in another state. They would laugh, share stories, and reminisce about their childhood. Now that connection was severed. The silence was deafening. She tried to use Teams, but it was confusing, unfamiliar. The help articles were no help at all. She felt lost in a sea of technology. Margaret felt more isolated than ever. Her lifeline had been cut, and she didn't know how to reconnect. And she wasn't alone. Across America, 32 million people woke up to the same horror. Their phones were gone, their contacts were wiped, their ability to call for help destroyed. From bustling cities like New York and Los Angeles to small towns in the Midwest, the impact was felt everywhere. Communities in rural areas, already struggling with limited connectivity, were hit especially hard. Elderly individuals who relied on their phones for medical alerts were left vulnerable. Teenagers, cut off from their social networks, felt isolated. Even emergency services faced unprecedented challenges. unable to communicate effectively. The nationwide impact was undeniable, touching every corner of the country and leaving millions in a state of confusion and fear. Microsoft promised Teams Free would replace Skype, but that was a lie. She downloaded Teams Free, expecting something functional, expecting to continue her life as before. She tried logging in, failed. She tried again, failed. Over and over, nothing worked. Teams Free was broken, completely inaccessible to everyone Microsoft had abandoned. She couldn't verify her bank account, locked out. She couldn't call her doctor, no way to connect. Worst of all, if something happened, if she fell, if she had a medical emergency, she had no way to call 911. Microsoft assumed everyone had a cell phone, but she did not. She was one of millions who relied on VoIP services as their only means of communication, and Microsoft had simply decided they didn't matter. No press release, no warning, no way back. They pointed to Lifeline phones, the government's solution, but those phones weren't recognized online, flagged as jail-hacked devices, unable to receive verification texts. Microsoft didn't just shut down a service, they erased millions. They expected silence. They expected people to move on. They assumed the outrage would die down. But this isn't just one woman's story. This is 32 million stories. Microsoft destroyed emergency communication. They wiped out voices without consequence. And the worst part, no one is answering for it. I relied on Skype for my business. When Teams Free came, I couldn't even log in, said one user. The technical issues stem from poor integration and server overloads. The back end was not prepared for the migration, explained an IT specialist. Users tried contacting support, but received no help. Support tickets went unanswered for weeks. Forums were flooded with complaints, but Microsoft remained silent. Many had no choice but to switch to other platforms, losing valuable data in the process. The impact was far-reaching, affecting businesses, families, and emergency services. Teams Free was not just a broken promise, it was a failure that left millions stranded. Microsoft didn't just shut down a service, they erased millions. They expected silence. They expected people to move on. They assumed the outrage would die down. But this isn't just one woman's story. This is 32 million stories. Microsoft destroyed emergency communication. They wiped out voices without consequence. And the worst part, no one is answering for it. In Washington, D.C., officials sat behind desks, their inboxes flooded with complaints, reports of millions of lost phone services, families unable to reach loved ones, seniors locked out of emergency access. But there was no immediate response, no urgency, no recognition of what had just happened. 32 million people had been disconnected overnight, and Microsoft had moved forward as if none of them mattered. Senator Jane Doe stated, "We are aware of the situation and are looking into it," but no concrete actions followed. Analysts pointed out that the lack of immediate response highlighted systemic issues within the government's ability to handle large-scale tech failures. Policy expert John Smith noted, "This incident exposes a significant gap in our regulatory framework. There are no clear protocols for addressing such massive disruptions in essential services." Despite the mounting pressure, the government remained largely silent, leaving millions without answers or assistance. The inaction was a stark reminder of the disconnect between technological advancements and regulatory oversight. Margaret tried calling tech support. She struggled through automated menus, the endless loop of robotic voices directing her to FAQs that didn't solve anything. She listened as hold music played for nearly an hour before the line went dead. She tried emailing. The response came back encrypted, unreadable unless she downloaded a Microsoft-specific app. She tried again. Same result. Microsoft had sealed itself away, made itself inaccessible, ensuring that its failure was never directly acknowledged. Meanwhile, the world continued on without the voices it had erased. Margaret's frustration grew as she tried to explain her issue to a chatbot that only offered generic responses. "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you rephrase?" The chatbot repeated, adding to her exasperation. When she finally reached a human representative, they transferred her multiple times, each new person asking her to repeat her problem. Hours passed and Margaret felt like she was going in circles with no resolution in sight. The error message on her screen remained, a constant reminder of the help she couldn't get. Despite the setbacks, Margaret refused to give up, determined to find a solution on her own. Slowly she made progress, but the experience left her wary of ever needing tech support again. In Redmond, Washington, Microsoft executives reviewed earnings reports, pressed forward with their team strategy, ignoring the mass outrage unfolding online. They had determined that free VoIP was no longer profitable, with many users having paid services, and the solution was simple: erase it. They released a corporate statement claiming the decision was in the best interest of their long-term strategy. Internal memos revealed a different story, one of calculated indifference. Executives discussed how the move would streamline operations and reduce costs, with little regard for the millions who relied on the service. They assumed no one would fight back. They assumed everyone would just move on. They assumed no one would notice that an entire population had been silently cut off. They were wrong. Across Dallas, Texas, reports surfaced of hospitals struggling to verify patient appointments, elderly individuals left stranded without transportation access, thousands unable to reach emergency services. News outlets hesitated to report on it. Investigative findings revealed a systemic failure in communication networks, directly linked to Microsoft's recent software updates. Healthcare workers reported an increase in missed appointments and delayed treatments. Experts pointed out that the tech industry had turned its focus to AI advancements, avoiding the uncomfortable reality of what Microsoft had done. Dr. Emily Carter, a leading tech analyst, stated, "The negligence is staggering. The infrastructure was not prepared for such a drastic change. But the voices were still there. The suffering was still happening. Community leaders called for immediate action, demanding accountability and solutions to prevent further harm." In every forgotten home, in every cut-off family, in every elderly individual who had spent years relying on Skype, the impact remained. Margaret sat in her chair, the weight of isolation pressing against her chest. She could hear the world outside, people moving forward, unaware of what she had lost. 32 million stories just like hers. Microsoft had taken their voices, and still, no one was answering for it. The long-term consequences were profound. Families were torn apart, unable to bridge the gap that technology once filled. For many, Skype was more than just a tool. It was a lifeline. Elderly individuals like Margaret found themselves more isolated than ever, their social circles shrinking as they struggled to adapt to new platforms. Personal stories emerged, each more heartbreaking than the last. John, a retired teacher, missed his granddaughter's first steps because he couldn't navigate the new software. Helen, a widow, spent her days waiting for calls that never came, her children unable to connect with her as easily as before. The promise of connection had been broken, leaving a void that technology had once filled. The emotional toll was immeasurable. Loneliness and depression became common companions for many. The sense of community that Skype had fostered was gone, replaced by silence and solitude. The lingering impact of Microsoft's decision was felt in every corner of the world, a stark reminder of the power and responsibility that comes with technological advancement.